I thought we'd start off this week with a little bit of housekeeping. First up, you might have noticed on the last video that my narration, not that it's ever great, was less than great. The whole family caught COVID last month. I'm still coming out the back end of that, which means I'm a little bit husky and a little bit coffee. So you might have noticed that. So for that, I apologise, but I didn't really want to give it a break due to the fact that I think one of the reasons the channel's doing better now is the regularity of the uploads. Secondly, if you followed the channel from the get-go, you'll have seen that it was always my intention to donate a percentage of the profits to charities, specifically charities serving military veterans. We are getting ad revenue now quite regularly to a point where we can do that. Don't get me wrong, we're a million miles away from actually making any kind of profit off this with the cost of running it, but there is enough ad revenue now to make good on that promise. So with that in mind, we donated $50 last month to a charity named Semplify, an America's Fund, and that's a charity that helps US Marine veterans. And we chose that largely because of a friend of the show, which is Luke over at Wartime Stories. He has been really supportive and helpful to us, and he's a former US Marine. So that was the decision making behind that. And last item, I just wanted to reiterate my apology to the good people of Yorkshire for absolutely mangling their accent in the latest short that we did for Operation Hengist. Both my grandfather and my father were born and raised in Leeds. That's part of the reason I decided to be brave enough to give it a go. Forgive me. I hope one day that the people of God's own country can forgive my sins and allow me to walk against their number again. The worrying part is that I've still got 2 more shorts potentially lined up. And frankly, I'm running out of usable accents now. So the only way is downhill. One of the main reasons that the ad revenue is up is just how well that the last episode has done. Morgan is our first video to do over 30,000 views. It literally did it in a week and a half. I'm not sure what the secret sauce is. All I can imagine is that because we're now putting out a video every Friday on the dot, that has somehow affected the YouTube algorithm and made it more accessible for non-subscribers. It'll be interesting with that in mind to see how Oubliette goes down this week. The shorts generally don't do as well as the main episodes, so it'll be good to see if we can sustain these increased views or if that was a one-off, in which case it's back to the drawing board. When I first came up with the idea for the Morgan, the plan was always to have a large range of victims on show in the episode that were identifiable from different time periods to emphasize how long it kept its victims and how long it had been operating for. And the easiest way to do that was with soldiers' uniforms. Quick Google for Holland discovered that it's been invaded more times than I would have first thought. So that's where the uniforms for the Spanish and the French soldiers came from. I was about halfway through the script for Morgan when it occurred to me to do a prequel. And the easiest way to emphasise just how much suffering and how long one of the victims of the Morgan would be held would be to go back and find soldiers from those conflicts and to pick one and to look at the story through their eyes. And if you include World War II, Holland's been subject to 6 different armies of occupation. The 2 I centred in on were the 80 Years' War and the Flanders Campaign. The 80 Years' War, it actually did last for 80 years, which is nice. Does what it says in the tin. And it lasted between 1579 and 1648. During that, various European states rose up and rebelled against Spanish rule, in particular King Philip II of Spain. The cost of a conflict going on for this long was immense, and there was actually a 12-year ceasefire in the middle of the conflict for both sides to rearm and reorganise before they all kicked off again. When the conflict finally came to an end, the Dutch had reclaimed roughly half of their territory from the Spanish, and they'd made some significant gains in overseas colonies and territories. And the loss would haunt the Spanish for decades afterwards, as they became frightened that if they got drawn into another conflict, it would materialise into another unending war that completely destroyed their economy. Intriguingly, one of the key factors that was led to the Spanish downfall is believed to be the fact that all the Spanish soldiers and mercenaries, when they did get paid, spent all their money in Holland while they were fighting there. So it drained the Spanish economy, but just reinforced the Dutch one while the war was going on. The Siege of Arnhem during the 80 Years' War played out very much how I described it in the story. Once the English had helped the Dutch to liberate it, it remained in Dutch hands and wasn't retaken by the Spanish until way further down the line, back in 1626. In 1794, the British, it's always a British, isn't it, persuaded a number of European nations to rise up in an effort to try and defeat the French Revolutionary Republic, because they didn't like it, because they didn't want people lopping off monarchs' heads. It's not a very British thing to do. The British Army was led by the Grand Old Duke of York. That's where the nursery rhyme comes from. And unfortunately for him, it's something that history would not forget. It was an awful campaign for the British and their allies. It was poorly planned, it was poorly executed, and 12 months later, the Dutch Republic essentially ceased to exist and fell into the hands of the French, following a series of significant French military victories, which drove the European armies back. During that, in January of 1795, you would have seen British and Hessian forces retreating through Nijmegen and Arnhem, because the month before, the French army had broken through the Allied defensive line over the River Vaal. Fast forward to the 10th of May, 1940, and the German army invades this time with a series of paratroop drops in Rotterdam and in The Hague. When the fighting became bogged down in Rotterdam, they whistled up for the Luftwaffe, who bombed the city into submission, breaking the will of the Dutch soldiers there. As a result, the invasion lasted 4 days, and the Dutch army capitulated on the 14th of May. I have really, really enjoyed writing the Morgan. I'll always have a space in my heart for the Atlanteans because they were where it all kicked off. But with the Morgan, I'm quite proud of what we've created because it feels different and it feels fresh. And that seems to be something quite hard to achieve in entertainment these days. You might have noticed that the black and white colour brief that we've worked off for the earlier schemes has been slipping away somewhat and now is pretty much gone. It's something I think we've outgrown, and certainly with this episode, Sean was really keen to go for a blue-green background to emphasise the environment that this creature lived in. Interestingly, his take on the Morgan is that she's a bitch, she's a girl. Now, I hadn't really specified or gendered the monster in the brief, other than to use the word master at some point, which I suppose is a masculine term. So on one hand, I'm a little bit intrigued and amused that's where his mind went, bless him. But I'm also happy to go with it. When I write, I'm always conscious to not spoon feed things for people, and to suggest things rather than forcing them. So if the audience wants to believe that the Morgan's a ditch bitch, fair play. I am a little bit tempted to do another Morgan story. Maybe go back to Roman times and have her dragging Lucius down into the water for that to go wrong. Or do you know what? Maybe there's another Morgan living in the dike on the other side of the road. Who knows? At the same time, I'm a little bit conscious that sometimes you can overdo something. So potentially we might leave it there. The next episode is it's another short, and it's a backstory for one of the human characters that we met during Morgan. I'm not going to tell you who it is yet, but you'll find out soon enough. And then we're building on past the Patreon episode then towards the Nerthal sequel that we've been teasing with the Henges shorts. When that episode does come, we're going to flip it round and have the short first, which will set up what happens then with the UFO after that. So we're going to flip it around a little bit. Anyway, we've reached that point in the video where I'm rambling. Thank you again so much. If you've got any questions or if you want to know anything, feel free to comment or email us. I'll try and get back to as many as I can. And I will see you guys again soon.